I'd like to start with some questions. What do you think this is? Well, we all agree it looks like a bottle. What do you think this is? Looks like an apple. But actually, what do you think this is? To the designers in the room, you might think this is a lamp. The musicians might think it's some new kind of percussion instrument. And the biologists, they might think it's like a plastic jellyfish. But in reality, the world where I come from, we all know that this is a unique designer chair printed in one go. The one-shot stool. Now, while you were observing this object, your subconscious mind was scanning its database of beliefs, its database of mental representation, trying to make sense out of it. And in a world where we're bombarded with 11 million bits of data per second, we need those beliefs to survive, to make sense of this complex world. And as these beliefs are built on our unique experiences, they represent the lens through which we view the world, we view ourselves, and we view others. Now, the bad news about these beliefs is they don't like change. Whenever we encounter information from outside our reality, these beliefs will influence our thoughts, which will influence our actions, which will influence the outcome in such a way to reinforce themselves. That's what we call the confirmation bias. And as we move through these cycles during our life, these beliefs go stronger, and we start thinking and acting in the same way. And before we know it, we get stuck in our bubble, which we call reality. This is also visible on the level of the brain, where at each new experience and thought and action, we are engraving new pathways. And you will understand from this picture what it means to look at the world through children's eyes. Children have 3 times more connections in their brain. Because as we grow older, and we think and act in the same way, the pathways that we don't use anymore, they die out. Now, as an innovation manager, I find that fascinating. We keep talking about innovation and change and the space of unexplored possibilities, while our subconscious is actually building fences around us, trying to make sure that new information doesn't come in, and if it does, it manipulates our behavior in such a way that we throw it right back out. Today, I would like to call that the self-sabotage of innovation. 85% of companies is failing at digital transformation. And the reason number 1 is they're failing at changing the organization culture. They're failing at changing the beliefs of the people. And today, I'd like to offer you 3 pieces of advice of how I believe companies, organizations, and schools can increase those innovation odds. And the first one is to create a safe space. Imagine your manager or your boss or your teachers come to you and says all of a sudden, I'd like you to change things. But your subconscious thinks that at the first mistake you make, your head will be chopped off. Imagine that everybody thinks that way. What do you think will happen? Nothing will happen. And that's why it's very important for leaders to create that safe space for experimentation and learning, where failure can be seen as success, where divergent thinking is allowed, and we focus on the journey rather than the outcome. Now, it's not enough to hang these principles on a wall of a fancy innovation space, appoint a CIO. What are we doing when things are getting rough? On my own project, for example, well, things haven't been going quite smoothly. After the first customer testing, we realized we needed a major redesign. So the plans really got changed. We exploded the budget, timelines got delayed. But when we presented that case and that situation to the board, they still invested in it. And when I saw the sparkle in their eyes when they saw the new prototypes, I knew they were walking the innovation talk. So that's great if everybody feels safe in our bubble. But what if everybody inside of the bubble has been looking in the same direction for the past 30 years, has been working on those same mental models? Well, in that case, ladies and gentlemen, I would suggest to engage in open innovation, to open your doors, to let new ideas flow in. In fact, that model is something that my company has been engaging in for the past 30 years. Because let's face it, 3D printing and technology It's just a tool. In order to create meaningful applications that you see here on the slide, we had to bridge our realities with leading players from different industries because they know what the customer needs. They know how to market that product. They know the regulations. And we know how to make the best out of our technology. So how do we bridge these worlds? Through events which we call co-creations. And this is where we invite people from different backgrounds, marketing, legal, engineering. We put them all into one room for several days, and each one is allowed to watch that same innovation from its own perspective. It's all about generating this conflict in perspectives. What I like is at the beginning of the week, they're all rather quite skeptical, holding on to their own beliefs. But by the end of the week, minds align, and we move forward as one force. Now, while I believe these two strategies are essential to innovation, there's one last strategy I believe could lead not 10%, but 10 times better innovations. And that is to innovate in the mind. Let's face it, when people walk through a company door, they don't just bring company beliefs. They bring a whole bag of beliefs, personal beliefs related to their childhood, their marriage, and deeply rooted beliefs. We have a huge impact on the way you think and behave. And through my personal story, I'd like to share with you why I believe deeply rooted beliefs are really the door to innovation. A couple of years ago, I opened this innovation company. And after finishing my assignment in China, after 2 years, I was called back to headquarters to discuss my future in the company. I was excited. I had worked super hard. My case got approved by the board, so I was ready to go and collect my medal. Well, things turned out quite differently. As I entered the room, my manager didn't want to discuss the results. He asked me one question. How much data do you need to make a decision? 70%? No. 50%? No, Kristel. 20%, and you need to follow your gut. He ended by saying, I'm sorry, I don't believe in you. I don't think you can make the click. What just happened here? What happened was a clash between his innovator mindset and my perfectionist mindset. He was all about possibilities, and I was calculating probabilities. He was following his gut, I was following my ratio. He was about the journey, I was about the outcome. But most importantly, for him, failure was learning, and for me, failure was just failure. I'd always been a high achiever in school, in sports, in music, and these strategies had always worked for me. But that day, they didn't work. So I decided to find out why. Why had I been behaving in such a way for all of my life? So I decided to take a journey to my subconscious. And what I found out that I'm a very positive person. My worldview is built on positive beliefs. It's a world of joy. However, whenever I face a new big challenge, a new system kicks in. A system built on a belief that I'm not good enough and makes me watch at life through the lens of fear of failure. And people, I can tell you, when those challenges rise, that's where my negative thoughts kick in, my anxiety and my stress kicks in. And that's what leads me to those strategies, risk-averse strategies that my manager was talking about. I can tell you, and all the perfectionists in the room know this, that this is not a good place to be. It chokes your creativity. It chokes your intuition. It chokes your decision-making. It chokes everything you need to be a good innovator. And that's where I realized I had to change. But can we change? Can we break out of those patterns that we have been engraving all over again for so many times? I decided to investigate, and I found out about neuroplasticity. That was good news. It tells us that our brain can still be changed even at an adult age. So I was excited about that. And as I was investigating, I found out of a prime example. I read about people who suffered trauma as a child. And because of that trauma, they developed such a negative worldview that they ended up in patterns of negative thinking and self-sabotaging behavior. They ended up in such a deep rut, which was almost not possible to get out of. However, In a recent study, Italian researchers, they experimented with psychedelic drugs to try and help these people. And when I saw the results of that study, that literally blew my mind. Here you can see an image of the brain of those poor people when they're still, it's the placebo condition, when they're still fixed in their way of thinking and behavior. However, this is an image of their brain after using psychedelic drugs. And that was my real eureka moment. When I saw that, I thought to myself, wow, that's innovation. That's what happens when you break out of those subconscious beliefs that have been limiting your whole life. Now, don't get me wrong. I am not suggesting me nor you should go and get high to innovate 10 times better. However, let's face it, I realized that while these people didn't have other options, it was my responsibility to break out of those limiting beliefs, to break out of those fear-based strategies it had been imposing on me, and finally start tapping into the full potential of my own mind. But how? How could I change if I couldn't reach those subconscious beliefs? Well, the only way was to put the belief to the test. I forced myself into challenging situations where I knew the fear-based system would kick in, and I knew I would be gravitating back towards those same old strategies. And at that moment, ladies and gentlemen, I promised myself to just try and do things differently. Let me give you an example. About a year ago, I had to prepare for a very important meeting last minute. Obviously, my thoughts came. Kristel, if you blow this meeting, you'll blow the partnership, you'll lose the trust, you'll even get fired. Great. So the only strategy in my world, was to work all night. Instead, my friends had another plan. They said, Kristel, let's watch Mary Poppins, then we'll meditate for an hour, and then you can work a little bit. Well, obviously, at that moment, I just wanted to kill them, because, that didn't make sense in my reality. However, I promised myself to try to do things differently. So I did. And what happened is that was one of the best meetings of my life. I was laser-focused. I was full of positive energy. Now, what did I learn from that experience? Well, that even if I really believed that if I didn't work all night, all these horrible things would happen. But they didn't. They didn't happen. It's by changing my behavior that I was able to prove my subconscious wrong. And ladies and gentlemen, this is just one tiny example of the many experiments I've been going through the last couple of years. And tonight, you're part of my final experiment of the year. And this was my beast's favorite. Yeah, it has been tough. However, tonight, it wasn't about doing things perfect. Yeah, it wasn't about the outcome. It was about the journey. It was about doing things differently. And the one thing I did differently this time was, for the first time of my life, I opened up about my fear of failure to so many people. And I can tell you the overwhelming support I received from my family, from my friends, from my colleagues, from the people in the organization, and even from strangers. That's what gave me the courage to feel that fear and still do it. We can fight many battles in life. But I realized that when we try to fight those deeply rooted limiting beliefs, things get rough. It's not a nice process. It's like fighting against yourself. That's what it is. However, I also learned that for each tiny step I was able to take in the opposite direction, life started, I started to feel much lighter. I started to make new connections in my mind. And as I was dismantling one of those core pillars on which I built my worldview, things started to change inside my bubble. I started to see things differently. I started to see myself differently. I started to see problems as opportunities. And I started to look through the lens of joy rather than the lens of fear, finding back my intuition and creativity. And today I'm working as an innovation manager, engaging the co-creations. And I'm mainly focusing on making sure that those limiting beliefs and fears don't sabotage innovation. Now, I promised myself that if I would reach this point in the experiment, I would ask you for one favor. And that is, to the leaders in the room, if you want to be successful at innovation, create that safe space, open your doors, but most importantly, invest in personal transformation. Chances are that you have been in that place and that you know the gift of a new mind. So pay it forward to everybody. To the people who are not leaders in the room, and regardless of your role, don't wait for the gift. Go into your subconscious, find out your limiting belief, and start experimenting. And I promise you that you too will start seeing things differently, and you too will start living with zero gravity. Thank you.